Now you're welcome along Wednesday Night Rugby. We have the regular voice that is Keith Wood. Hello.
Good evening, Joe.
How are you? How you doing?
Very good, thank you.
And we have the less regular voice, but these French boys are looking pretty good, so we need some intel, we need some info. James Coughlan, great to have you with us, James. How you doing?
Thanks for having me. I'm good, thanks.
Can I brutally remind people in a just bullet point form of what you've been up to for the last couple of years? Can I take a stab at that?
Go for it.
Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
So obviously everybody knows you from your Munster days. Player of the Year in 2011, I might add. The other nominees, Keith, I had a quick look back that year in 2011. Ronan O'Gara, Doug Howlett and Keith Earls. Now, if your agent didn't use that on the way to POW, he was at nothing.
Absolutely.
You can ask him yourself what he would have played with him, so it's Crow. So, you can ask Crow what he was up to at that stage.
Yeah, well, in fairness, Niall was always a good man. He'd be a good man to get a deal. But he'd used everything he possibly had in his armoury to get whatever he could, so no harm in that.
Well, I would have led with that. Yeah, so 3 seasons with POW in 2014, retired, took the job in the POW Academy in 2017. In 2019, you did some coaching in Pro D2. In 2020, you joined Brive as defence and assistant forwards coach. And in 2021, last year, you went to Toulon as defence coach. There was a brief period after the coach was sacked where you were interim head coach. And now that Frank Azema has come on board, you've gone back to your old job, which is defence coach at Toulon. Are they the major points? They're the major plot points?
Yeah, I'm doing the forwards now as well. So it's defence and forwards. So there's Eric Samati that does the scrum, and I'm looking after the lineup now as well. So Sergio Parisi was looking after the lineup, but Frank made the decision that he was going to he wanted to coach his coaches and players playing. So I've been doing the forwards now basically since Serge came in regards to the rock, or since Frank came in regards to the rock and all the contact areas, the defence for the team. And every other bits and bobs that fall in between the sticks, kind of have put my hand up for as whatever was going, basically. You know.
Very good, very good. You'll be 10 years there before you know it. Have you enjoyed the French experience? I don't know, was it something you always were planning to do as a player, or is this a very unexpected adventure?
No, it was never something that kind of came into my head. I think Keith will tell you as well, when you're winning Munster, Munster's the be-in and end-all, and it was the year Simon Mannix left Munster. He asked me would I be interested, and I knew if I hadn't gone then, I would have never gone. And honestly, the initial thing was to go for 2 years to stay, or 3 years maybe, because put the kids into international schools, rather thinking, look, it's better for them to come back. And it's 8 years now. So yeah, as you say, it won't be long, 10 years now coming up, and I'm loving it. I'm loving it's the stress, the pressure, the whole lot. But I love it here.
Very good. How's the French?
French is good. Yeah, French is good. I said it to Woody there a while ago. The unfortunate thing now is I can understand what they're saying about me. So I'm not sure if that's a good or a bad thing.
So we've loads to talk about. Keith, let's just tear the plaster off this one very quickly. And I hadn't really planned to bring up World Rugby's Law 3, paragraphs 13 to 20 in all that much detail, but I just saw that Michael Glennon of RTE was in touch with World Rugby, and certainly they say they've no plans to do anything about the law or make any changes or put in any clauses. Their spokesperson, Dominic Rumbles, said it's an unfortunate chain of circumstances. He was talking about the weekend, obviously, here. An unfortunate chain of circumstances, and they're incredibly rare, is how World Rugby feel about what transpired on Sunday. Is that fair enough now the emotions have calmed down and everybody's kind of got over it? Is it fair enough to leave the rule as is because those circumstances are so rare, or should they put in some kind of change?
I think they have to put in a change. I know Dominic, he's a good guy, actually. It's an incredibly rare occurrence, of course it is, and I don't think anybody figured that might happen. It was put in for the right reason, but you can't have a situation where if somebody is sent off, the two people have to go off. That's just not fair. And you can talk, I remember listening immediately afterwards in the aftermath about people saying, well, maybe somebody else would get a little bit of an advantage by putting somebody else into the front row or having non-contested in that fashion. You don't. And it looked wrong, it felt wrong. For me, in that instance, what you'd love to have had was what would have happened in times past is that the spirit of the law would be adhered to by the referee, and they could say, well, this isn't somebody trying to pull the wool over my eyes. This is the guys after getting sent off after a guy had been injured within 3 minutes. This is not somebody trying to get an edge for it. And for me, it could go down to the referee then to be able to make a comfortable decision. As it was, he couldn't make any other decision. What he did was he adhered to the law as was written. But in that instance, that's just not something you want to have. And I think there's nothing intentional involved in that law writing. Like, that's an unforeseen circumstance. But now that it's been seen in the first place, will other teams try and maneuver themselves into that position? I can't really see it. So for me, it just has to change.
It's a relatively recent law, actually, James. Only originated in 2017. I was reading, apparently a Welsh match against Georgia cited as one of those reasons. So it's not like this has been on the go for forever and a day. Would you have seen chicanery on this front at the various levels you've been coaching at or playing at?
No, it's funny because I was just going to say we're aware of the rule because on the team sheet you note whether it's a tight head, loose head or a hooker. So you have to note your front row replacements have to be noted. That's how it's done in France. I'm not sure how it's done at home or in the international games. But the front row replacements are noted if they can play loose head, tight head or hooker to avoid that. So when we're doing the fight the match, the team sheet that goes in then to the referee, to avoid that situation we put in, like as in the loose head can play tight head, the tight head can play hooker, the hooker can play loose head, whatever the players are comfortable in doing. But most coaches would be aware of it, so I'm surprised the Italians weren't or didn't have somebody, one of their loose heads or one of their tight heads noted as a hooker as well on the team sheet, and that would have avoided them having to play a 14. Then obviously, you need the players to be comfortable to play the three positions or whatever it is. But it is something that you're aware of.
Yeah, just on that, Joe. 20 years ago, I played for Munster against Colombia, and we had a variety of injuries just before kickoff. Immediately during the game, Frankie Sheehan came on, and I went to tight head because it's uncontested scrums, and the referee said no, you have to scrum.
Right.
And I had never played tight head before. I had no idea where to put my hand. I totally cheated and grabbed the prop behind the knee and lifted his leg. We pushed them into the hoarding at the side of the field. And then we had 5 more scrums for the rest of the game. And he absolutely ate me alive. And I had to head off the referee going off the field. And because it was wrong, And so you do have to try and protect the players, but you do need the laws to be appropriate for that to be the case. And even if people knew that was the case beforehand, if you see somebody sent off and it means 2 people have to go off, that's wrong.
Yeah. And James, have you seen instances where this law is needed? As in, have you seen uncontested scrums which you suspected were manipulated and cynically brought into effect by a team saying we're getting killed at the scrum, let's find a way out of this?
Not in an amateur level, but on an S4 level, if teams were, which would be the under 23s. And sometimes, to be honest with you, even at that level, the ref will take the matters into his own hand and say it's getting to the point where it's dangerous. There's the unfortunate situation where a young player from Stade Francais was killed during a game against Bordeaux a couple of years ago. So they had a good look at the laws in regard to professional players playing against amateur players or players who aren't full-time contracted. But at an international level, as Keith is saying, it's just not right. A red card is a red card. That's fine. The guy he was correct in his decision. But then to have 2 guys taken off for that, it just doesn't sit well. It's double punishment. As they say, look, the IRB or the World Rugby are saying, it's so rare, we're not going to change the law. And
think you're gone. Are you coming back? We'll give it a moment.
We just talk while we're Well, he's stuck there for a second.
Well, I've loads to ask you about. Let's move to the red card, which is the reason, I suppose, that the scrum issue and this World Rugby law came up for discussion to so much effect. It was kind of interesting, you see, you know, Peter O'Mahony saying, I'm not sure these red cards help the game all that much. And I suspect a lot of players look at that red card and think, oh, come on, benefit of the doubt and timing a touch off, and we're talking fractions here. Surely and no intent, and the no intent point really is irrelevant, but surely, and we'll bring in James in a moment because he is a defence coach, surely at this stage, if defence coaches and players are not realising the required culture shift, then there is no mitigation. There is no, I was just a fraction out. I mean, this is what the game is now asking of players, to not tackle and risk contact with the head. They're still going high, Keith.
Well, for me, it's a different. That was a standing tackle. So, if you're looking to try and describe what it is that you want some defender to do, it's to be bent and hinged at the waist. Now, he doesn't have to be down with his head down onto the ground, but that standing hit tackle where you're there's no bend down. Then I don't think there's any mitigation. So I thought it was a red card. It was looking for the contact and where it was, but it's not. I think if you're hinged at the waist and you're in a position to make the tackle and somebody dips into you and you dip up, I think that's where the mitigation goes. And I think that's probably the defining line and the difference. That standing tackle is only really in the sport for the last 10 years, I think. For the most part, it wasn't really part of the defensive setup beforehand. And it's something that has to be got back out of the game, because it's very hard to get yourself into the right position if that's where you're starting from. And it isn't as if he'd stood into that position. He was in that position from the start, and Sheehan ran at him, and Sheehan did have a small dip. He definitely did. Yeah. Because he's dipping to get into contact, which again he's supposed to do. But when you're coming from the other position, I don't know that you can get into the right position. So for me, I was certain it was a red card. Is it? And always, as all these things, when a player is asked his view immediately afterwards, do you want to have them there or not? No. Of course, you don't want to see any red cards. That's not part. You don't want that part of the game. You don't want it to be 15 against 14 at all. You don't want it. But until such time as that changes, that type of tackle is taken out of the game. So we've seen the spear tackles and the tip tackles. They're pretty much gone. And actually, every time we see it now, we're almost offended by it. We need to see the same with these tackles, and we don't need to see arguments about them afterwards, and we don't need to hear conversations of intent. You can have mitigating. I think there will be high hits. There will be contact above the shoulder level that will be mitigated down to a yellow card, or mitigated from a yellow just to a penalty, because circumstances will dictate that. This, for me, isn't one of those.
What would you say about the Irish performance then?
Nothing. It's very hard to take a huge amount out of it. I found the one thing that maybe I was frustrated with, and it was very hard to have any interest in the game, right? So because the game as a contest was pretty much over, I thought Ireland tried to play in the manner in which they'd set up to play, and maybe they didn't need to do that. Maybe they needed to change, and they needed to change on the field, where a little bit more pick and go around the edge, because Italy were having to fan out a little bit and come up hard in the line, and you needed to bring them in a little bit more for any of those plays to really work. And I also thought it got very flat. You know, the whole sense of the occasion seemed to be very dead. And I would say that it looked like rugby didn't come out of it very well. That's apart from the fact Italy's effort was phenomenal, down to 13 and then 12 players. You know, it's quite extraordinary that would actually happen, and the manner in which they played, they can be proud of. But it's frustrating. I just thought it was frustrating for everybody.
Even take the first 18, 20 minutes while there were still 15 against 15. You compare the zip and the fluency in the Irish play in the opening minutes of the Welsh game versus what Ireland produced against Italy. There was something off. Now, is that more to do with Ireland, or increasingly our teams watching the tape and doing their analysis and coming up with ways to disrupt Ireland? What are you seeing on that front?
I think it's funny. The first match of the Six Nations is always an incredibly unusual position to be in, because you don't quite know what the other teams have worked upon. They've definitely done things that are new and different. And as the tournament goes on, you end up, people pick holes in what you've actually done. So I think they were able to put pressure on. But I also think it's hard to keep that level of sustained performance. And this is a criticism of Ireland consistently. You can get up for big games, and there still was a feeling that this is a team that Ireland will beat. There were a lot of changes to it, and I don't think you can expect the exact same level of performance when you have different players that are moving in. And I think it was a mixture of the two of those. And you also feed off the crowd, and the crowd gets excited for I'm going to say bigger internationals.
No, it's true. It's true.
And they do, and players feed off that, and they know in their heart of hearts it must be very frustrating for players. It's very frustrating for coaches when they've performed very well during that week and then they don't quite get there at the weekend.
James Coughlan, you're back with us.
It's working, sorry.
We've got you now. Jeez, the French Wi-Fi is rubbish,
great.
James.
Okay.
What's going on?
It's the Wi-Fi and the phone. I connected the phone. I tried everything. I don't know what to say. I'm sorry, boys.
No, you're back. So let's say Eddie Jones picks up the phone. Says, James, I hear you're doing great defensive work over there in France. Give me the plan. What do I do to disrupt this Irish attack? Where are the weaknesses? Where are the weak spots?
I think he's going to go after Ireland up front. Let's be honest about it. They have a massive pack of forwards, England. They'll be looking to be a bit more ferocious at the breakdown, I think, than Ireland. And then they won't be playing a lot. They'll be playing territory. They'll be playing in good positions, trying to get a good rolling ball, and then stay disciplined and stay keeping the game and go 3-6-9 and win the game without doing a whole lot, because they have to play with their strength, and that's what they'll be looking to do. I can't think of them doing anything other than that.
I was just asking Keith, the first 20 minutes against Italy, even when it was 15-15, we didn't see Ireland at their most fluent in comparison with previous games, and the French obviously found a very real way of disrupting the Irish attack. Does any part of you think maybe as opposition coaches start to look more and more at the Irish game plan, sort of sprung really to an extent in November in particular on the back of that English game of the Six Nations, are opposition coaches starting to find ways, do you feel, to slow down what the Irish are trying to do?
I think if you look at them, you can see it's quite, not that it's quite predictable, but they have to get their pot of three with a back behind it, and they play a lot out the back of the first forwards. Quite regularly, it's Tyke Furlong, obviously you've Doris, and Tyke Byrne is in that position a lot as well. But I think a lot of teams are starting to shoot on that back that's out the back of the pot of three. So if you can get in position with a good spacing in your front line, that you come up hard, and then you have one floater that can come up behind and try and cut off that attack, then you're going to put Ireland under pressure. But a lot of Ireland's play is based on having really quick balls. So when you slow down the ball, when you give them a ball that isn't as quick, and then you're able to get your defence in position. So I think they'll put a big focus on their ruck work, and then I would be surprised every so often you'll see a 9 coming up and just shooting out the line to try and cut off that pass that goes out the back. So like the Irish game plan has been like that for a few years now. It's been there obviously when Andy was with Joe. It's been pretty much the same, and it's been working. It's, why would you change it when it's working? But I think obviously they've relied heavily on the high ball with Conway, who's been exceptional under the high ball, chasing and then playing off the counter attack. So England will put a big focus on their high ball reception, and I think a lot of focus on the ruck, and that capacity to put pressure on that back that's behind the potted three.
Just while you were gone there, we were just touching on the red card. You're a defence coach. What are you saying to your players about tackle height at this stage?
If we're going to go high, we're going to go as two. We're going to try and get a choke tackle. We've got big men, so it's quite difficult to have them in a really low tackle focus. But the bigger men, we've always been saying, if you're going to go in, we go as a choke tackle, and then the smaller boys, but we've guys like Eben and Brian out of Wednesday who are over 2 meters. To tell these guys to get low tackle focus is nearly impossible. So we try and get them in position where they can go for a choke tackle. And then for back rows, it's a really low tackle focus so that we can either get a contest on the ball and try and win the numbers game, because as a defence you want to have as many people standing up in relation to the attack. The more people you have standing up in front of the defence, the harder it is for them. So we send a contest from the inside and keep our integrity on the outside, which is what we've been looking to do. We've been quite good at it. But obviously that first impact is the key for everybody. You know what I mean? You win the first impact and your game, your defence is in position behind it after that. We are aware it's not as we haven't got yellows and reds like we've been seeing the last while, you know what I mean, in regards to the tackle height. So we've been quite lucky in that situation,
Right, okay, because it does seem as if certainly a lot of players are still tackling high and are still risking those red cards, and I would have thought every defence coach ultimately would be saying, well, it's not worth the price here of losing a man with any kind of regularity, so we're just going to have to drop right down to midriff or whatever is just enough to maybe try and stop the ball being offloaded, and any higher is just a big no-no.
Honestly, I think the ones that you see a lot of the time are swinging arms, that guys are in a bad position to start with. So my focus during the week will be to get guys as close as possible for the tackle, so that we're not, you're getting your foot in as close as you can, and you get your same foot in your same shoulder in the right body position. So when we do a tackle technique with the lads, that we'll be putting them in positions where they've got their arms ready for the tackle, they get the impact, and then they get squeezed. But you're always, like, from a young age, you're always told about watching the hips. And that doesn't change. The levels you go up, we watch the hips. When he takes a step, then you get your impact with the shoulder, and then you squeeze with the arms. The thing is, with the speed of the ball, the speed of the guys who are running, the speed of the reaction, you see a lot of the red cards. It's not just guys who will come flying out of the line to smash somebody. It's actually a lot of guys who are in bad positions who then stick out the arm or go to try and tackle somebody in a bad position, and that's where they're caught for the high shots. But everybody knows the laws, and we're trying our best to get the tackle height down. It's just, when you're asking somebody for a second row of 2 meters and whatever to get his height down to hip level, it's difficult. So if they are going to stay big, then you have to adapt to, and your type of tackles need to adapt to it,
Okay. Let's talk France. Keith, I was just having a glance back in advance of the game at Murrayfield in 2018, which is just 4 years ago. It almost encapsulated the revolution. So 4 years ago at Murrayfield, France went over there, this team fancied, full of talent. They lost the game at Murrayfield. They had a big night out. The police were involved. Their flight home was delayed. 8 players were suspended. Jacques Brunel was the coach at the time. And you fast forward 4 years later, on Saturday, 0 players from 2018 were involved in the French 23, and obviously Galtier has gone in with a new coaching ticket. It has been the most remarkable revolution as opposed to evolution, and they just that scoreline, if anyone didn't see the game, that scoreline doesn't really do justice the extent to which they were just superior to the Scots in almost every facet of the game.
No, it was a fine game of rugby. There were a couple of moments in the game where if Scotland had held on or had scored or had got a little bit closer and pressed home a couple of advantages. If they'd managed to do that, it may have been different, but that's a pretty big may. And for me, I looked at the game and saw how France came out in the second half and said, okay, that's what Ireland were able to resist the previous week and were able to deal with the previous week, and Scotland were not. But equally well, like Ireland lost to France, but all their players played pretty well, and played at a high standard. Scotland's big players didn't perform. Finn Russell had a poor game and put his team under pressure at different times, and he was under unbelievable pressure. And it's one of those interesting things which I often had as well. Like he is now earning his crust in France. So there's special intimidation comes up for players that do that as well. And it's amazing how those things get into the psychology of the player, of the team, of the players against him even. And so I thought there were mistakes in that game. There still wasn't of the standards that it could have been. And but they looked as if they weren't going to lose. They looked as if this is the way they're set up now. They're set up to win. And so every team that plays against them has to take every single chance because their tails are up. And it's been a long while since France's tails were up in that fashion, where they had that sense of confidence. They rarely had that sense of confidence away, so it's very unusual for them. So, but they're on a crest. I still wonder whether they can absolutely keep that, because it's only a few years since they were flaky on some of those trips. But as you say, this is a young team that has been brought together to try and win a World Cup. So, I mean, it's theirs to lose.
It does seem that way. James, I think two of your players are in with the French camp, including Gabin Villiers, who's had an amazing tournament. Might chat to you about him.
Yeah.
What are they saying about this culture change at international level in France? And also, I'd be curious, I'm sure you've even asked them, given your area is defence at the moment, the Shaun Edwards effect. Geez, they've bought into this guy. And when he first went over there, I thought, I'm not sure how long he's going to last. I thought they might make short work of him, but it's been the total opposite.
Yeah, no, he's made a huge effort in regards to the language barrier. In a lot of videos now, you can see actually Shaun speaking French. The other thing is, as Woody just said, France win key moments. Hulk has that chance in the 37th minute to score. He doesn't take it. And then France scored just before halftime. 3 minutes after halftime, they score again. Changed the game. But I think the thing for France now is that they really believe in what they did, what they're doing. When he came in, Galtier spoke about playing at this jeu disposition is what his phrase was. So it was like playing without the ball. We're going to defend really well. We're going to kick intelligently, and we're going to attack like that. Now their game has progressed, and obviously they've got two of the best players in the world with Intermac and Dupont. Jaminet at 15 has come in and he's made a big difference with the length of his kicking. He's put a lot of, anytime they're in trouble, he's got a big long kick. He gets them out of trouble. And then you have, you have the powerhouse in the middle with Fiku, Dante, Nakawara can't even get the team now. And up front, they're very, very solid. By Marchand, Williams, Walkie, Cross is kind of like an enforcer in that group in the back row, and Alderic and Gelange in the back row is one of the best. The globality of their team is probably the best team in the competition, and it's if they can keep ticking over like they're doing, they've got a good. They talk about the says in their coaching setup as well to keep them disciplined. Their line-out functions well. They serve out with with their scrum. I mean, they've quality everywhere. So I think, as you say, it bodes well for the World Cup, especially seeing that they're going to be playing at home.
Yeah, because what we've heard from several Irish coaches working over in France is that over the years they wouldn't have sensed a huge amount of enthusiasm from the players at their respective clubs going into French camp. wasn't something they relished, didn't seem to be something they were fully on board and enthused with, and that has completely turned on its head now. I don't know if you've seen that change.
Yeah, well, look, it used to be called Malcatraz. The centre was Marcosi. Malcatraz, or we're going to Malcatraz for 6 weeks. So, I mean, just you don't hear that anymore.
Right.
Thibaut Giraud is the strength and conditioning coach. He was here in Toulon before the year before I came. So, like, the players now, it's a regular setup. It's pretty much the same group all the time as well, Joe, and that makes a big difference. I mean, the continuity. Obviously, there's a massive portion of it Toulousan group. So, but it, like that, you can see the continuity in the group. That everyone gets on. That they work hard together. And they have their little days in Marcosi locked in, but they still, the family, the wives and girlfriends, the kids can come and see them, and then they can, you know what I mean. It keeps it fresh, because otherwise, it can be difficult. Marcosi is in the middle of nowhere. You think Paris, beautiful, but it's actually an hour from anywhere. So it's easy when you're winning. Winning culture breeds a winning environment, and that's what they're at now at the moment.
Yeah, very good. Listen, the Wi-Fi is probably just misbehaving a touch, so I think we'll count our blessings and say good evening to you for now, James, and thanks for the time. Much appreciated. James Coughlan there.
All right, thanks a million, guys. Sorry about the Wi-Fi. I'm doing my best.
No, you're okay. Not at all. Not your fault at all. Thanks very much, James Coughlan there, giving us his time, who's working at Toulon at the moment. So, Malcatraz, I hadn't heard that, Keith. So, like, when you think about it, what a waste of a decade. Like, none of the players were even that bothered. Well, maybe that's too strong a way of putting it, but they weren't fully on board with playing for their country, and you think, like, it's the pinnacle for pretty much everyone else, and they're trudging in.
Yeah, I think there's an element of that. I also think when we talk about the French setup, you've talked about Shaun Edwards, Galtier. Galtier is a flamboyant Frenchman. Ibanez is a pragmatic Frenchman, and Willem Servat, who James mentioned there, was a fantastic player, and again, very pragmatic sort of guy. They've got a decent blend. They also have the support where they're getting more access to the players than they had done. They're not having to be drifted back into different games. That's been a bit of a change. So part of the drive for France to get the World Cup, I think, was also the different things were going to change. And there's a huge amount of players that are coming through the system, but to have the courage of your convictions and also the support of the federation to allow you to pick players that are 19 and 20 years of age, knowing that they're going to make mistakes and lose. And that's exactly what they did. And now they picked very great players, and they have become pretty fantastic as they've grown in experience. They don't seem to have a huge amount of fear, and they've done it together. So there isn't a hierarchy really within the team. I do think they're using their players incredibly well. I think Willems is phenomenal, and Antonio is phenomenal. He's putting in unbelievable shifts, and it's been interesting to watch how they play. I think they're exciting to watch, and this is something that present day players and coaches never really want to hear, but the game needs to be exciting, and it needs to draw in people that want to go and watch it. And when you look at the first weekend, France and Ireland was an extraordinary game, one of the great games of the Six Nations. France-Scotland was a very good game. Ireland-Italy struggled because of the sending off and that law. Wales-England struggled because it was slow and every scrum took an eternity. So, you do need to have both of those things that happen. And sometimes you get so stuck inside in the bubble of what it is that you're doing. You have to remember that people pay quite a lot of money to go to those games, invest a lot of time and emotional energy into it. And it does need to be something winning and exciting, which is the holy grail, I think, for everybody.
Yeah, I think yourself and Stuart Barnes are going to be on together next week in advance of England against Ireland. So I'll just get a quick thought from you on England. The news today is that Eddie Jones has made 8 changes to his 25-man squad. George Ford, gone again, turfed out. He just does not like George Ford. That ship is sailing. And Elliot Daly, who did start 2 matches at 13, out of the squad as well. Manu Tuilagi is recovering still from a hamstring strain, so he's not officially in. Anyone is saying this is a very confused picture from England at the moment in terms of what they're trying to do out there. So give us your best explanation. What are they trying to do out there?
I don't know what my best explanation is. I'm a little bit fearful, which doesn't make any sense almost, because I don't understand what Eddie Jones is doing. It's chopping and changing. There's a level of uncertainty. I'd say there's not a player goes into camp knowing that he's going to be back into the camp the following week, almost, apart from maybe Marcus Smith now. And that wasn't so certain 2 or 3 months ago. I don't know whether it's destabilizing to a point of where it's the strongest will survive at the end. I'm not quite sure. I don't understand it. And yet I know that England and Twickenham have the ability to up their game and play at a standard. They've had a huge amount of injuries. Tuilagi coming in and going out again was terrible for them. George Ford being out of the squad, again, I don't quite know why you're brought in, why you're brought out in that fashion. The one thing I did have a conversation with Killian Keane, who former Munster player, played once for Ireland. Killian's view was, why would you ever take off the quarterback? And maybe that's the point. It's that your out half is on, he should be on for the 80 minutes and dictating what should happen. And maybe that's the manner under which Eddie Jones is looking at it. And if somebody else has to fill in, it wouldn't be a guy that would ordinarily be on the bench as an out half, but it could be one of the other players that could fit in there. And but I don't know. You're kind of guessing what's happening with him, and you're guessing with what way he goes. He doesn't go about it in any fashion that you would say would really lead to results. And he's an unusual character. An awful lot of it is about him, and that's fine because he has success. But I think a lot of players seem to get discarded along the way, and I'd always be towards the line of the player rather than the coach, I have to say.
Yeah, well, we'll tease it out next week with Stuart Barnes in a bit more detail. Thanks for the time being. Appreciate it.
Brilliant. Great talking to you.
Keith Wood with us here on Off the Ball. And our rugby coverage is with thanks to Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team.
Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.